Many of us have dreams to make it big, but how do you actually go about making this a reality? Today's guest did just that. Chuck Masek is the founder and former president of Vanguard Medical Concepts and author of At War with the Big Dogs: How One Man in Need of a Job Started a $1 billion industry. Chuck joins me via Zoom from Tampa, Florida. Chuck, thank you so much and welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. I look forward to talking with you.
Absolutely. So, Chuck, first of all, can you give us all a brief snapshot of what your book is all about?
Well, it's a true story about a group of men and women. We called ourselves the Band of Brothers. We started an industry that had never been done before, and the industry was about reprocessing devices labeled single use. As you can imagine, the manufacturer were upset with us. And the whole story is about how this group of people, over a period of about 17 years, were able to survive and grow and get registered with the FDA, and finally was able to uh, be bought by another company.
Interesting. Okay. So, you know what it's like to be looking for a job and not being sure of what your true purpose was. So, can you share a bit about those struggles in the beginning there?
Well, it's interesting about life. You don't normally start out knowing what you want to do. And I tell people, particularly young people, I said, look, they'll say, I want to be an entrepreneur. I said, well, let's first step back. What are you good at? You see, God gives everybody talents. The job of a young person, or one of the jobs, is what is your talent? They'll say, well, how do you do that? I said, well, it's easy. There's a saying, in the counsel of many is wisdom. I said, what you need to do is ask everybody, ask your parents, ask your siblings, ask your boss, your pastor. You ask enough people, they will tell you what you're good at. Because the thing about a talent is it comes so naturally to someone, they think it's easy. But not everybody can do what everybody else does. When you understand what you're good at, then pursue that. Because what you'll find when you pursue that, you'll pursue happiness. Forget about the money. The money may or may not come, but you won't go to work anymore. You'll go to Joyville, okay? And your life will be complete. So they'll say, well, yeah, but if I want to become an entrepreneur, I say, well, listen, an entrepreneur is not what you do, it's who you are. And from the time I can remember, even as a young boy, I was always asking, why can't you do that? Why can't you do this? I always questioned things. In business, when I started out, well, that doesn't work. I can do better than that, even though I probably couldn't. Even though I couldn't, I was always questioning. People say I have a problem with authority. That's probably to some degree true, but always questioning. And I would say to an entrepreneur, someone who just doesn't take the status quo. In fact, he's almost repulsed by the status quo. And so that was who I am. I didn't know that at the time because I thought I was just someone who couldn't keep a job. But turns out that God had plans for me that I didn't know about. In fact, I'll tell you a real quick story. I'm going to college. I got out of the military. I had decided what I was going to be. And I was terrified of public speaking, which sounds crazy for a salesman, I know. Anyway, I picked the only course at Louisiana Tech that did not require a speech course, and that was med tech. Didn't know anything about it, but I'll be that. Went to med tech, graduated, couldn't make any money, went back and got my master's degree in clinical microbiology, went back to work in a hospital, couldn't make money. And from there, I became an entrepreneur. But you know what God did? He used everything in my life. That medical degree, medical technology and microbiology, I've used all my life in the medical business. So I guess being an entrepreneur at the end of the day is just not taking the status quo, okay? But I say to all young people, be what God intends you to be and you will be content. If you fight against that, you're trying to put a round peg in a square hole and it never works.
I like those metaphors there, good little bits of wisdom. So, Chuck, at what point did you decide that being an entrepreneur was your calling?
That's a good question. I don't know. It's funny. I don't know that I ever did, except when it just became so obvious. All I was trying to do in my life was supposedly get ahead. It's funny, when you get there, you go, that's it. I said, that's it. See, once you got the money, there's no happiness. I still live in the same house I've lived in for 30 years, 40 years. I'd live in a big house, but I don't, because that's not important to me. What was important to me was to get somewhere, and I got there. And you know what? I found out I was just as happy now as I was back then. Nothing changed. My wife is faithful. I have all the things that count in life, all the important things.
And what type of advice would you have for someone who is trying to get a business started?
Well, I'll tell you a funny story. This older guy, he seemed older at the time, he was probably 60. He said, Chuck, there's only 3 rules to be successful in business. I said, really? I got my pencil out. What are they? He goes, never run out of cash. I wrote it down. What's the second rule? Never run out of cash. Oh, what's the third rule? Never run out of cash. Now that sounds funny, but you know what? Many people have gone broke by not counting the cost. But of course, that goes back to the Bible too. You're supposed to count the cost before you build a house, or you look like a fool. So that's part of the name of being successful. Is first understand the cost, then understand the risk. You know, the first question I ask myself when I'm going to do a business, the first thing I ask myself, is this going to kill me? I check that box, no. Okay. Next box, I say, am I going to lose all my money and all my wealth? Check that box, no. And then I say, okay, now what are the real risks here? Because they say entrepreneurs take risks. That's not true. Entrepreneurs manage risk. That's what they do. Okay. I would say too, behind the backdrop, and I don't know why I'm this way, but for some reason in my whole life, I've never worried about things. I just don't. My wife tends to worry, and I love her for that. In fact, one time we were during Vanguard days, we were having troubles, and she was worried. I said, honey, you don't worry. I'll do the work. You can take a break. She goes, no, you say you're worried, but you won't worry. I have to do it. so anyway, that's it.
Yeah. Now, Chuck, you just mentioned Vanguard. So maybe tell us a little bit about how you went about starting Vanguard Medical Concepts. How'd that come about?
Well, I'd like to tell you how great a thought person I was, how great an entrepreneur, but everything happens because of other things. I had made a big investment in Haiti, and I lost about $2 million in Haiti and everything. I was 40 years old, had four children between 13 and 7, $250,000 in debt, and we're going to lose a house. And let me tell you, that's not a place you want to be, because my wife was obviously, her house and her home is very important to her. And I thought that I might lose my wife over this. But you know what she did? She circled the wagons, and anybody that would attack me, she would defend. I tell people all the time, you can call me a turkey, but if you do it in front of my wife, you'll just gain an enemy. So I lost everything. And I said to myself, okay, what I'm going to do, this is bad. I don't know what to do. So I said, what am I good at? Well, I'm good at sales. I'm a good salesman. So I picked up my bag, went back to sales, back to square one. And that's a very humbling experience to do, because you have to do a lot of soul searching. You have to do a lot of self-examination. Was it my fault? Why this happened? It's in the book, by the way. But I'm in the central supply lady's office, and I'm bemoaning my situation. I see a thing on the desk. It's like a suture pack, but it's big. And I said, what's that? So it's a suture pack. We have a company repackage them for us. I said, well, the manufacturer does that for free. Well, they stopped doing that in 1988 because of the AIDS epidemic. Really? Well, I can do that. So I borrowed $20,000 from my parents who were retired. I borrowed $20,000 from my wealthy brother, who's a radiation oncologist, with the promise I wouldn't move in with him when I got old. And I went around Tampa Bay area collecting sutures, and the humble suture pack started the whole industry. That was not a used device; it was just an unpackaged device. And all of a sudden, I realized the hospital said, can you do this? Can you reprocess this? Well, I guess we can. Then I realized, well, wait a second, there's a whole industry. I almost got dizzy. Think about all the stuff out there, all the medical devices being thrown away that had been used once and could be reused again. And it was the humble suture pack that started the whole thing.
Wow, that's incredible. Who would have known, right?
Who would
So
have
yeah,
known? Who would have known?
yeah. So with this company, you ran into a lot of adversity as you built your company, right? So how did you deal with that?
You know, it's interesting. As I told you, I don't particularly worry, but I always do believe this, that things happen for a reason. There's purpose in life. And so as we face these adversities, I realize if we're going to be out of business, then that's up to God. I can't do anything about that. All I can do is my job. And over the years, I saw certain things that had to happen that I didn't know had to happen. And if it didn't happen, we'd be out of business. Now, I can say, look what a great person I am. I know I'd have been out of business, not even know why. The backdrop is the sovereignty of God working through life. Okay. Now, look, we did a lot of hard work. We fought a lot of big enemies. But again, it was unbelievable things we went through. I mean, these manufacturers, they lied, they cheated, and they stole. I mean, they did things that were unethical and illegal. But when you're 27 billion, it's hard to sue a $27 billion company.
Yeah, now, these are those big dogs that you're talking
These are
about.
the big dogs. Yeah.
Yeah, so
I'll tell you, one medical company is 27 billion and 25 billion. Then they go down from there. But these are multi-billion-dollar companies. So,
yeah. So they noticed you and they started to give you troubles. What
well,
did
they did. Many
Yeah.
troubles. Yeah.
And how did you and
First,
your team deal with that?
here's everything they threw at us we actually turned in our favor. For example, they said to the customers, you got to go down to their plant and see what they're doing because they're just washing things off of the garden hose. And of course, we had to fly the nurses in and the doctors and the administrators and show them our plant. Very expensive, very time consuming. But guess what happened? They came down and said, wow, this is doable. It does work. You aren't washing things off of the garden hose. It actually helped. Then the manufacturer said, well, they have no government clearance, which was true because the government would not allow us to get our price cleared. We could still market them. And they said, no 510Ks, that's the term they use. And they beat us up with that. And then we got the clearance and said, well, that's not important. And one thing after the other. When they finally lost every battle, the final battle was when they went to the FDA commissioner and had him pull 2 of our products off the market. It was done so behind the scenes, and it did hurt us. It did hurt us, but we did recover from that. And again, we prospered actually.
That's amazing. Now, Chuck, you've worked in healthcare, the healthcare industry for many, many years. So what are your thoughts on the current system? What needs to change?
I'm not an expert in the healthcare system. I can only talk about medical devices. I can say this, that we need to find better ways of making products less expensive and better. The thing that we pay $100 for in Europe or in Asia, they pay $25 for. And why is that? I don't have all the answers. I just know that we have to provide healthcare at a lower cost, but keeping the same quality. And we have a good healthcare system, quite frankly. And I think as Americans, we're merciful. We want to take care of the poor and help. I know I do. But I can't speak for the whole healthcare system. I can only speak for the medical devices.
Got it. Okay. So Chuck, your success wasn't handed to you on a silver platter. We've heard some of the challenges that you've overcome, but tell us a bit about your challenging home life as a kid and then later joining the military, even though your dad suffered from PTSD.
As I said, my dad was a tender-hearted man. He became an artist later in his life. He was a good guy. He really was. But this thing called PTSD, when you live through it, you can say the letters all you want, but what happens then, something sets them off. It could be something as easy as putting your elbow on the table. And they go with a hot flashing temper straight up and straight down. It lasts maybe seconds or minutes, but it's terrifying. I only put one example in the book because I didn't want the book to be about my situation, but there are hundreds of them. I remember when I was 12 years old, okay, my parents fight 3 times a week. One's with blood, 2 without blood. Now, on 8 years, I got to go through so many fights. I said, I can do that. I mean, the kids rationalize this in his head. So when I got out of school, my grades, I graduated at 1.99. I think the region let me graduate because the Vietnam War was on. They figured I'd get drafted anyway. And I left home in the military. It's the only thing I felt where I just felt it was a place to go because I didn't have any skills at the time. And it turned out it was a good place for me to go. And that's where I went. And of course, I was in the Air Force. I wouldn't find anybody. I was stationed in Crete, and it was a beautiful island to be stationed on. So I did quite well there and then prospered. And as you may not know, I met my wife there.
Right. Yeah. You mentioned that in your book. And of course, you guys went through a season of rough times as well and survived all of that. You've had your share of challenges in life.
It's funny, the answer is yes, but I'll tell you, everything that's happened to me has made me a better person. And I think I've learned more from my failures than I ever did from my successes. Because the failures define who you are, how you respond to them. See, it's not it's the old Chinese proverb, fall down 6 times, get up 7. It's not how many times you knock down, it's how many times you get up, okay? So I look back, and my wife and I talked about our upbringing. She had a rough upbringing too, but they all worked for the good. And so I feel blessed for the backgrounds, as strange it may seem. I feel blessed to be here. And I hope that the book will be a blessing to young men and women who read it and say, you know what? They survived that. We can too. It'll be an encouragement,
Yeah, absolutely. You've got such a great story to tell, Chuck, and we thank you so much for your time today. It looks like we are running out of time, but thanks so much, Chuck. Chuck Masek is the author of At War with the Big Dogs. Thanks so much for being on today.
Thank you.